Every motorcycle review talks about horsepower and acceleration, but none mention the brutal truth about survival rates. What if I told you that some motorcycles were specifically engineered to kill their own riders? That's not dramatic. Certain bikes have death rates so high they earn the nickname Widowmaker. Imagine finally buying that performance bike you've wanted for years, only to discover that every ride could be your last. In this video, I'm breaking down the 13 motorcycles that will send you to the morgue in 2025. And trust me, the #1 choice will terrify you. It's so dangerous that insurance companies refuse to cover it entirely. Watch every second, because this isn't just a review. It's the difference between riding motorcycles for life or becoming another statistic of engineering gone wrong. Number 13. Buell RS1200. Eric Buell had a vision. Take the raw power of a Harley-Davidson V-twin and stuff it into a proper sport bike chassis. The result was the RS1200, a machine that promised American muscle with European handling. What riders got instead was a bike that felt like it was constantly fighting itself. The RS1200 packed a 1,200 cc air-cooled V-twin, producing around 70 horsepower into a short wheelbase frame. While this setup made the bike incredibly agile in tight corners, it created a nightmare at highway speeds. The rear suspension was critically underdamped, causing what riders described as a pogoed sensation over bumps. Every imperfection in the road would send the bike bouncing like a basketball. The short wheelbase that made it so nimble also made it dangerously unstable at speed. Combine this with harsh engine vibrations that would numb your hands and feet on longer rides, and you had a machine that punished riders for wanting to actually ride it. The front brakes were powerful enough to cause severe front-end dive, while the transmission was so clunky and loud that many riders thought something was broken. But the real killer for Buell wasn't just the engineering challenges. Parts availability became a nightmare, and riders found themselves needing significant aftermarket modifications just to make their bikes reliable. When Harley-Davidson finally shut down Buell in 2009, many saw it as a corporate mercy killing rather than a business decision. Number 12. Maico Enduro 685. If you thought street bikes were dangerous, wait until you hear about the Maico Enduro 685. This 684cc two-stroke single was described by those who rode it as the baddest of the lot. With 82 horsepower in a machine weighing just 101 kilograms, it was quite literally one of the fastest and scariest ways to travel on dirt. The power delivery was savage and unforgiving. Short gears and a narrow power band meant that one small mistake with the throttle could launch you into orbit. But here's where it gets really dangerous. This beast was notorious for being almost impossible to start safely. The high compression ratio meant kickstarting required tremendous force, and the kickback was legendary. There are documented cases of people being hospitalized after attempting to start a Maico 685 without proper riding boots. Broken bones from kickback weren't just possible, they were almost inevitable if you weren't careful. Even experienced off-road riders who could handle the starting procedure found the bike's narrow power band made it suitable only for the most advanced riders. One moment you'd be putting along at low RPM, the next you'd hit the power band and the front wheel would be clawing at the sky. This was a machine that demanded respect and punished anyone who didn't give it. Number 11. Harley-Davidson Dino series. Since 1991, Harley-Davidson's Dino series has been plagued by what riders call the death wobble. Picture this. You're cruising down the highway at 70 miles per hour when suddenly your bike's rear tire starts kicking from side to side. The handlebars begin to oscillate violently. This isn't a gradual loss of control. This is an immediate, pants-filling emergency that can happen without warning. The problem stems from Harley's unique engine mounting system. Unlike other manufacturers who attach the swing arm through the frame, Harley mounted the Dino's swing arm through the transmission case only. The entire drivetrain essentially floats on rubber mounts, allowing excessive movement that gets amplified by engine vibration. Harley tried fixing this with a frame redesign in 2006, significantly increasing the frame's weight. It barely helped. Frustrated owners began developing their own solutions, upgrading tires, installing fork braces, and adding steering dampeners. None of these modifications completely solved the problem. In 2005, an aftermarket company developed the PosiTrack stabilizer specifically to address the death wobble. The fact that a third-party company had to engineer a solution for a fundamental design flaw tells you everything about how dangerous this problem really was. Harley's response? They often blamed rider error or lack of maintenance. The company has aggressively defended death wobble cases in court, sometimes countersuing riders who complain. This defensive stance suggests they knew admitting to a systemic design flaw could open them to widespread liability claims. Number 10. Honda CX500 Turbo. In 1982, Honda decided to experiment with turbocharging. The CX500 Turbo represented cutting-edge technology, Honda's first computer-controlled electronic fuel injection system, and their entry into the turbo wars. What they created was a maintenance nightmare that would bankrupt most owners trying to keep it running. The fundamental problem was the engine design itself. When the stator failed, and it would fail, you couldn't just replace it like on a normal bike. The entire engine had to be dropped and the case split. Same thing for oil seals, coolant seals, and cam chain tensioners. Basic maintenance required major surgery. But even when it was running, the CX500 Turbo suffered from significant turbo lag. The power delivery was unpredictable at best, and when cold, the bike was described as almost unrideable for the first few minutes. It would jerk around and struggle to idle, making it dangerous in traffic situations where smooth power delivery could mean the difference between life and death. The handling was generally described as spongy, and the single disc brake was inadequate for the bike's power potential. Honda recognized the problems and replaced it with the 650 Turbo after just 1 year, but the damage was done. Only about 5,000 units were produced before Honda gave up on the platform entirely. Number 9. Kawasaki GPZ 750 Turbo. If Honda's turbo experiment was disappointing, Kawasaki's attempt was downright dangerous. The GPZ 750 Turbo, produced from 1984 to 1985, suffered from such severe turbo lag that experienced riders described the power delivery as a sudden hit that could throw an inexperienced rider off the bike mid-corner. When cold, the bike was virtually unrideable for the first few minutes, jerking around and struggling to maintain idle. Many came from the factory running so lean they couldn't idle properly, causing a noticeable stumble when you tried to accelerate from a stop. Imagine trying to merge into traffic when your bike hesitates every time you twist the throttle. The turbo lag created a dangerous delay where nothing would happen when you opened the throttle, followed by an explosive surge of power. In a corner, the sudden power hit could easily overwhelm the relatively unsophisticated chassis, leading to high-side crashes. The insurance industry took notice. State Farm and other companies reportedly created blacklists of motorcycles they would refuse to insure, and all turbo bikes made the list. Turbo became synonymous with too fast and too dangerous in the eyes of insurance providers. The GPZ 750 Turbo lasted just 2 years in production. The combination of technical challenges, maintenance complexity, and insurance industry resistance effectively killed factory turbocharging in motorcycles. It would be decades before manufacturers seriously attempted turbocharging again. Number 8. Suzuki GSXR1100. The early 1990s Suzuki GSXR1100, particularly the 1989 K model, earned a reputation as both a performance icon and a lemon. With 156 horsepower, it was exceptionally powerful, but the chassis simply couldn't handle what the engine was dishing out. The problem was Suzuki's decision to use an older double-cradle frame design that couldn't match the precision handling of competitors. The bike suffered from chassis flex that caused low-frequency wobbles when hard on the brakes. The 1989 K model specifically had handling problems attributed to changed geometry or improperly set up suspension units. The GSXR1100 became known as the weapon of choice for hooligans, but this reputation came with a deadly cost. In 1989, Suzuki racer Phil Meller died while riding the GSXR1100K race bike at the Isle of Man TT. Jamie Witham also crashed in the same race. These incidents were so severe that race authorities banned big bikes from racing for several years. The This temporary racing ban represents one of the few instances where a motorcycle's inherent dangers led to direct regulatory action. The fact that racing authorities, people who understood motorcycles better than anyone, deemed big bikes too dangerous speaks volumes about the GSXR1100's handling problems. Later GSXR models would face recalls for frame cracking under extreme stress, suggesting Suzuki continued to struggle with the balance between power and structural integrity. Before we continue with our countdown, if you're finding this exploration of motorcycle engineering failures as fascinating as we are, make sure to subscribe. We dive deep into automotive history and the machines that shaped our understanding of safety and performance. Number 7. Buell Superior SS100. The Buell Superior SS100, introduced in 1924, was marketed as the Rolls-Royce of motorcycles. It was a marvel of engineering for its time, but it also represented the absolute limits of 1920s motorcycle technology, and those limits could kill you. Journalist Hunter S. Thompson captured the danger perfectly when he wrote about similar high-performance machines of the era. If you rode the Black Shadow at top speed for any length of time, you would almost certainly die. This wasn't hyperbole. It was a cold assessment of what happened when raw speed far outstripped the capabilities of chassis and braking systems. The SS100's handling was described by modern critics as evil when pushed hard. The brakes were simply awful by any standard. The bike would get snaky when banked over hard for a fast corner on a poorly surfaced road. While the drum brakes were modified to disperse heat better than others, they remained fundamentally limited by 1920s technology. The most famous and tragic example of the SS100's danger was the death of T.E. Lawrence of Arabia, in 1935. Lawrence crashed his SS100 while swerving to avoid two boys on bicycles, suffering severe head injuries that would prove fatal. But Lawrence's death led to something revolutionary. The neurosurgeon who treated him, Hugh Cairns, began extensive research into head injuries among motorcyclists. This research ultimately led to the widespread adoption and mandatory use of crash helmets, saving countless lives. A dangerous motorcycle's tragic legacy became the catalyst for one of the most important safety advances in motorcycling history. Number 6. HarleyDavidson VRod. The VRod represented Harley-Davidson's attempt to create a modern performance cruiser, but it came with hidden dangers that would only become apparent through official recalls and legal cases. The most serious issue affected 2008 to 2011 models equipped with ABS. DOT4 brake fluid is hygroscopic, meaning it absorbs water from the atmosphere. If this fluid wasn't flushed according to the strict 2-year maintenance schedule, it could gel and form deposits on the ABS system's apply valve. When this happened, the valve could stick, causing a complete loss of brake function on the affected wheel without any warning to the rider. Think about that for a moment. You're riding normally, everything feels fine, and suddenly you discover you have no front or rear brake. The design was so dependent on precise maintenance that any deviation from the schedule could turn your brakes into decoration. The VRod was also associated with the broader Harley death wobble phenomenon, where the rear tire would kick from side to side at highway speeds. But the most damning evidence of Harley's safety problems came through the courts. A $287 million judgment was awarded against Harley-Davidson after a fatal crash caused by a faulty traction control system. The system incorrectly activated one of the rear brakes due to a faulty rear wheel speed signal, causing an unexpected change in vehicle direction. The crucial detail? This was a known, recalled issue, and the rider had been explicitly told by a Harley dealership that the problem was fixed on their bike. This case established that a manufacturer's responsibility goes beyond just issuing a recall. They must ensure the fix actually works and is properly implemented. Number 5. Yamaha VMax. The original 1985 Yamaha VMax was everything XS represented in the 1980s. Big capacity, massive horsepower, and a chassis that simply couldn't handle what the engine was putting out. It earned nicknames like the Muscle Cruiser and Arm Ripper for good reason. The VMax was incredibly fast in a straight line, but behaved like a crackhead monkey in most turns. Even with advances in tire technology, everyone understood this bike was designed for drag racing, not actual riding. The handling was so poor that experienced riders would plan their routes to avoid corners whenever possible. But the real danger was the braking system, which was described as woefully lacking. Owners frequently commented that the bike goes twice as fast as it stops. Imagine having a machine capable of serious acceleration, but without the ability to stop safely. The VMax has been subject to multiple serious recalls. The 1985 models suffered from front wheel bearing failure that could reduce motorcycle control. Later 2009 models had electrical issues that could cause the engine to stick at 3,000 RPM when you release the throttle. Imagine trying to stop at a red light when your engine won't return to idle. Perhaps most seriously, 2009 to 2011 models faced a recall for oil pump malfunction. Abnormally high oil pressure could force a washer against the housing, causing oil to stop pumping through the engine. This led to catastrophic engine damage and sudden stalls, dramatically increasing crash risk. Number 4. Suzuki TM400 Cyclone. The Suzuki TM400 Cyclone, produced from 1971 to 1974, earned the infamous title of the poster child for the phrase "injury forces sail." It's frequently called the most dangerous bike ever built, and for good reason. The Cyclone's electronic ignition system operated like a deadly light switch. It would run in a mild retard mode until around 4,000 RPM, then suddenly jump to full advance with no graduation. This created an unpredictable bang of power that would terrify even experienced riders. One moment you'd be putting along normally, the next you'd be fighting to stay on as the bike launched itself forward. The chassis construction was completely inadequate for this power. The frame was so light and poorly constructed that it couldn't handle the engine's output. Riders reported the back end swapping so bad they could see it moving in their peripheral vision. The bike was described as looking like a fish flopping on a beach when going down rough straights. But here's what made the Cyclone truly notorious. It was dangerous even when it wasn't running. The high compression made it incredibly difficult to start, often leading to excessive kickback during the starting process. Some riders got injured just trying to start the Cyclone, sustaining broken bones from the kickback. The bike's reputation became so bad that it's genuinely hard to find an owner who would say they never had a serious problem or crash. Suzuki continued producing the Cyclone despite knowing about these dangers, but eventually stopped when people simply stopped buying it. Even Suzuki recognized that a reputation for broken bones was the worst review they could receive. Number 3. Kawasaki H1 500 Mach 3. The Kawasaki H1 500 Mach 3, produced from 1969 through 1975, carried multiple ominous nicknames, the Triple with the Ripple and another Widowmaker. This 500cc two-stroke triple claimed 60 horsepower, but delivered it in the most dangerous way possible. The H1 suffered from severe rearward weight bias, with 57% of its weight on the rear wheel. This created notorious handling problems that made cornering a clench-your-cheeks-and-pray affair. The power delivery was classic two-stroke, unpredictable and light-switch sudden. When that power hit mid-corner, high-side crashes were almost inevitable. The frame was constructed of small steel tubes that proved to be fairly weak and prone to flexing under stress. Early models came with drum brakes that were questionable at best for a bike capable of this speed. Even worse, the bike was prone to tank slappers when accelerating through corners, and stock H1s occasionally suffered piston seizures due to detonation. The combination of ferocious acceleration and extreme danger for inexperienced riders had real-world consequences. Insurance premiums for Kawasaki triples began to increase dramatically, directly affecting sales. This market response marked the beginning of the end for what was otherwise an innovative and fast motorcycle. The H1 was consigned to history by 1975, killed by a combination of changing consumer preferences for four-stroke bikes and increasingly tough exhaust emission mandates. But its legacy lived on as a cautionary tale of what happens when raw performance isn't balanced with controllability. Number 2. Suzuki TL100S. The Suzuki TL100S launched in 1997 and quickly earned its own Widowmaker nickname. It represented Suzuki's attempt to create a superbike with F1-inspired technology. But that innovation nearly killed the people who rode it. The TL100S was infamous for its buckaroo-style handling and tendency toward tank slappers. The root cause was an F1-inspired rotary rear suspension damper positioned too close to the exhaust. During aggressive riding, the oil in this damper would overheat and lose its damping properties, creating a severely underdamped rear end. When this happened, the bike became violently unstable, particularly at high speeds. The instability could rapidly escalate into what riders called a death wobble, a terrifying loss of control that could happen without warning. Combined with non-linear and unpredictable power delivery, the TL100S became a machine that could throw even experienced riders without notice. The 1997 model lacked modern safety features like ABS and traction control, which might have helped riders manage the instability. But the core problem was the overheating damper, a single component failure that made the entire bike dangerous. Following a spate of serious accidents, a worldwide recall was issued. Bikes were retrofitted with steering dampers to try to improve stability, but the damage to Suzuki's reputation was done. The prevailing sentiment among riders was that no bike should need an aftermarket fix just to keep you from tasting asphalt. The TL100S proved that even advanced engineering could backfire catastrophically if not properly tested under real-world conditions. It became a textbook example of how innovation without adequate safety consideration could create a truly dangerous machine. Number 1. Kawasaki H2750. At the top of our list is the machine that started it all. The 1972 Kawasaki H2750, the original Widowmaker. This 750cc two-stroke road rocket delivered 74 horsepower and could hit 126 miles per hour, making it shockingly quick for its day. But it was also shockingly dangerous. The H2750 was equipped with what riders called brakes from the Stone Age, stopping power equivalent to a bicycle despite the bike's incredible acceleration. Early models had only a single front disc brake, completely inadequate for a machine of this performance. Stopping such a high-speed bike was described as very challenging, particularly for inexperienced riders. The power delivery was the stuff of nightmares. Like many two-stroke engines of its era, the H2 delivered power in an irregular and unpredictable manner. The sudden acceleration was described as hitting like a sledgehammer, a light-switch power delivery that could easily cause riders to lose control. Perhaps most dangerous of all was the frame, which was not rigid and highly prone to flexing at high speeds. The bike was known to wobble at speed and drag its undercarriage in fast corners, indicating severe instability under stress. When you combined an overwhelming engine with inadequate brakes and a flexible chassis, you had a machine that was extremely difficult to control. The H2750 had a relatively short production run, lasting only 4 years from 1972 to 1975. While Kawasaki tried to improve later models with longer swing arms to soften power delivery and improve stability, the fundamental problems persisted. The bike was ultimately killed by stricter smog laws and the Arab oil embargo that tripled fuel costs. But the H2750's legacy lived on. It established the template for what would become known as Widowmaker motorcycles, machines where raw performance far exceeded the supporting technology needed to control that performance safely. Every dangerous bike that followed owed something to the H2's example of how not to balance power and control. After looking at all these dangerous machines that earned their deadly reputations, you might be wondering what motorcycles actually get it right, especially for riders who want performance without the life-threatening engineering failures. If you're thinking about getting back into riding or looking for something more manageable than these Widowmakers, check out our video on the 20 best Harley-Davidson motorcycles for senior riders, where we cover bikes that prioritize safety and comfort without sacrificing the riding experience that makes motorcycles so addictive in the first place.